Okay, let's get this show on the road, as they say. Welcome everyone. I think I know everyone bar a few people in the room. I'm JP Bosman from the Center for Learning Technologies, and it's my honor and privilege to welcome each and every one of you to our seminar today, which is the first of the 2017 seminars. We call them Carl Oer or Vice Rector Learning and Teaching seminars. We'll have one each term, and this is the first one. And so it's lovely to welcome all of you. I want to welcome Professor Skoonwinkel, to welcome Dr. van der Merwe Antoinette, and then also, you can't see him yet, but on our Skype, we have Professor Yusuf Wahid, who is our presenter. You'll hear him soon. And just to everyone, a big word of welcome. What you see is that we've got some technology here, and it's a bit complex, but with Henny's help, and a big word of thanks to Henny and also all the colleagues from the center for helping with the snacks and setting up, etc. But we have this live presentation in the room. We have Professor Wahid coming in on Skype. Then we also have this whole experience going out via Adobe Connect, which is at the moment Stellenbosch University streaming and web conferencing solution. And so I also want to say a special word of welcome to the colleagues at Tygerberg. They are in the CHPE in the seminar room there, and I think they can hear us well. Walter and Daryl is there, I think, and other colleagues, and also from Military Academy, from the Saldanha campus. There are few colleagues, and I think there are also some, watching and taking part from home. I'm not sure where everyone is, but that little list of online participants are quite high. And Antoinette is nodding. So, hello everyone out there. Let's start. The structure for the presentation is, as you saw in the invite, is that we will have a kind of a three perspectives approach. I will really shortly just indicate around this MOOC, Massive Open Online Course, Teaching for Change, sort of the institutional perspective. Then I'm going to ask Dr. Faik Wahid to bring in a little bit of quite a lot actually, of the learning design perspective. In other words, the nuts and the bolts of the teaching and learning side of such a fully online course. And then we're going to go over to Professor Wahid, who will then give us maybe the most important part of today is the reflection, the experience of the educator, of the teacher, of the lecturer that facilitated this very interesting process. So I guess when we had to decide on a theme for the first seminar, it almost came to us. We had this MOOC and it ran again in January and February, and I think we basically feel quite proud of it. So I think that's the first reason. We want to share, we want to celebrate it in a sense, and also with the wider university community, what we are learning from this whole experience. So that's what we're going to talk about. So firstly, just the broader institutional vision. That's the MOOC that came to be, Teaching for Change, an African philosophical approach on the FutureLearn platform. And it's so beautiful to see Stellenbosch University there, to see the logo, to see our insignia. It really started actually through the ICT for Teaching and Learning Council project, with the special funds that were allocated. And at that time, and that was already 2-3 years ago almost, we just thought we had this idea that we should include something around this emerging space, which is the MOOCs, the Massive Open Online Courses. And so we designed something in the budget for that project. Faik is the project leader of that project. And so we started that project. But why is the question? Well, the first reason is we now had the project, so we had to do something. The second reason is related to that one. It's basically, I guess, just having one. Because as you would have seen, many of the other universities, like UCT and also WITS and UP, all are started to dabble with this whole thing. So we thought, listen, we can't stay behind. We also need one. We have to have one. But deeper than that and a bit more meaningful is this question of why we do it as an institution. And I think what is at the bottom is hopefully, first of all, the idea of showcasing, of sharing excellence of our people, of our knowledge, of our courses, and who we are with the rest of the world. I think that's quite deep. the question still is, what is the future? Are we going to make money? There are many open questions that we can maybe address at the end. What is this the direction of modules, of whole programs? Where does everything fit in? What about short courses, fully online short courses? There are many open questions. So the whole idea of sustainability going into the future is still an open question. But what I want to say is that through this experience, we started getting a taste, I think, for the future. And we've learned many lessons. And there are colleagues in the room here that actually helped, and for equal acknowledge all of them just now. And we've really learned so much. Just by doing the first one, we have learned a lot. So we're getting a taste of what it might mean to be a digital, or incorporating the digital or the online, whatever, in our spaces. So that's the first thing. Then the second question is, why a teaching MOOC? And this is quite strategic, actually. So when we needed to find a MOOC, FutureLearn, all the MOOC companies, they do extensive research on where the needs are, what people want, in a sense. And this is kind of the 8 editorial priorities that was set up by FutureLearn. And you can see we've indicated teaching is a very important one. And so when we suggested this topic, it was really lapped up, and it was really supported from the start by the colleagues. Then the question is, why FutureLearn? FutureLearn is one of the platforms like Coursera, edX. Those are the other big ones, and there are also others that are more paid for, etc. Well, we knew that FutureLearn has a very good track record. We also know it started from the Open University, and it has links with the BBC, so there's lots of quality, etc. And as you can see here, there's basically lots of centers and institutions of excellence and partners of excellence, and also universities that are involved in this. And that kind of growth over a very short period of time, those are the amount of learners that actually are on the platform learning, taking part, grew from 1 to 3. Where is it now, more or less?
5.7.
Now it's already at 5.7, in 2 years' time. So it is a platform that's courageous and growing. We also like the fact that they build it on a social learning type of approach. Faik will say more about that. And also we've been working a lot with our UCT colleagues that's sort of a bit ahead, and they could confirm to us that working with the FutureLearn colleagues and the people there, and having the courses on FutureLearn is good, is meaningful, is robust, and all the things, checks and balances. So that also played a big part. Lastly, I just wanted to say that, and this is the more philosophical one, is Laura Chernovich from UCT. She's been at our own SOTL conferences and Altasa, I think she's been saying this for years now, is that what is lacking is research and this idea of the creation of knowledge from the global south, the voice from the south. I mean, you can call it many things. And it's very interesting that if you look at this map that we have on here, these are the main participants in MOOCs. You can see it's 33% from the UK, international 67%. So actually Africa is not on there. And so it's almost a must that we should just create something. We should contribute to the knowledge from specifically an African perspective. We should put ourselves on this map, and we should also play a part in the global MOOC arena. And those are some initial thoughts around the institutional perspective. We're going to ask Faik to come up and to share the learning design perspective.
Okay, good afternoon, colleagues. Okay, so Teaching for Change. Teaching for Change was the first philosophy MOOC on FutureLearn and the first African philosophy of education MOOC of its kind in the world. It attracted about 5,000 students, with the vast majority of students coming from the United Kingdom, United States, Australia, South Africa. But as you can see, there were representatives from all over the world. Some remote areas like Iraq, Afghanistan, Iceland, and some other South American countries as well. Let me just move this. So with regard to the age demographics for Teaching for Change, the vast majority of students fell between the 26 and 35-year-old age group, which is typically your postgraduate student. But as you are aware, learning is a lifelong journey, and there were some individuals that were over 65 that also participated in the MOOC. Okay, so like JP mentioned, FutureLearn prides itself as being the world's premier social learning platform. So in other words, there's a strong social component to the teaching and learning pedagogy. Another thing that they try to promote is the idea of telling stories. For instance, one of the more popular MOOCs on FutureLearn is actually a forensics course. And it's actually a murder mystery that the students actually have to solve. But the only way you get to solve the murder at the end is by actually learning the skills throughout I think it's a 6-week course. So just so that you can get a feel of how some of the videos and the course looks, I'm going to show you a 1-minute clip. It's essentially the trailer for that forensics course. Okay, so that's just a sample of how some of the courses on FutureLearn look. There are many courses in cooking. I can't even mention all of them, but there are thousands of courses now already on FutureLearn. But for Teaching for Change, am I on the right slide? Yeah, for Teaching for Change, we didn't necessarily have a story to tell, but what we proposed to the course developer was to potentially adopt a case study approach. So the course was essentially set up from scratch. It was a totally brand new course, which also ensured that we adhered to the university's copyright policy. So it was actually a win-win for us. So we made use of various case studies. Some of the case studies include the TRC, the whole issue of Boko Haram terrorist activity in Nigeria, military dictatorships in Egypt, women in farming communities, and also the South African student protests of 2015. So all these were societal issues endemic to South Africa. Okay, some information about the artwork in Teaching for Change. Every FutureLearn course requires essentially a course banner. And we decided on using Nelson Mandela as the course banner for Teaching for Change. Some of the more the main underlying theme behind Teaching for Change was the whole notion of justice. And as you're aware, Nelson Mandela is a symbol for justice, and so we were able to obtain permission from the Nelson Mandela Foundation to go ahead. This was actually the original image that was taken by Louis Gubb, and we adapted the image. We basically took 1,000 photos of the Stellenbosch University area, the students, the staff, flora, fauna, buildings, and we essentially constructed this art banner that would be actually also represent the university and also the course. Yeah. Okay. So in our research into what actually makes a MOOC successful, in other words, drawing in large volumes of students and also achieving high completion rates, we deduced that MOOCs which are content rich, or should I say video rich, and also media rich, tend to draw in large volumes and actually keep the large volumes of students to complete the course. So I need to make special thanks, I have to give special thanks to my colleague Lucille Miller and also Monet de Klerk, who spent many an hour deliberating on which images would actively convey would effectively convey a philosophical concept being discussed in a video. Also, thanks to Henny and Dani in our studio team that also facilitated in the video for the pre-production phase. And then the course, right? So this is a screenshot of week 1. So as you can see, a MOOC is characterized by videos, article steps, discussion steps, in some instances also quizzes. And also, but this is a little bit different to how the other platforms look, such as Coursera and edX, in that there's a very strong social component. So whenever you do a particular step in the MOOC, say for instance this is a video step, the social aspect is built in directly with the step. So that is what JP was referring to when he mentioned the social learning. Okay, for Teaching for Change, our learning design was informed by the work of Diana Laudelard. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what Laudelard's book is about, but essentially we tried to include as many learning activities as possible. So for instance, learning through initiation, learning through inquiry, learning through practice, learning through production, learning through discussion, and also learning through collaboration. So if you look at this side, you will see, of course, the first video would be learning through initiation, followed by an article step, which would be inquiry, an opportunity for practice, production, discussion, and collaboration. So initially, the first video in the MOOC is essentially your initiation step, and that allows the learner to come up with his or her own initial conceptual understandings of what is being taught. And that is followed by an inquiry step, which encourages the learner to seek out and read more about what is being discussed. And that is an opportunity for the student to also reflect and then also kind of modulate his or her understandings of the philosophical concept being constructed. There's also then a practice step, and that's where the case studies fit in. So the students get to see, or the learners get to apply the philosophical concept to a real world situation. And again, they get to modulate their understandings even further. And then they are also, throughout the course, encouraged to comment and produce arguments. And in that way, they get to articulate their understandings of what is going on or how they feel about a particular situation. Like I mentioned, discussion is quite important throughout the Future Learn platform, and that was continuing throughout the course. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about this. I think Professor Wahid will discuss this. And then also learning through collaboration. As the students began to engage with each other, sharing their ideas, sharing their opinions, some of them began to come to consensus, and they essentially collaborated with regard to some of the ideas that were being discussed. So essentially we tried to incorporate these 6 different types of learning activities in Teaching for Change, and I feel that it was fairly successful. We generally MOOCs have a low completion rate, something close to 30%, but for Teaching for Change we had a completion rate of closer to 40%. So we were able to keep the students engaged for that 4-week period. In fact, even though the course has ended about 2 weeks ago now, they are still engaging on the platforms. And now I'm going to transfer you over to Youssef, and he can give you some of his experiences with regards to Teaching for Change.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. It's good to to be back at Stellenbosch, although I'm far across the Indian Ocean. I want to share with you some of my experiences with the MOOC, and I want to start off by saying, when I thought initially this was going to be a very short course that need to be written up, and my colleagues would put it on a platform, I actually misjudged myself. I soon realized that even though you completed the MOOC, the actual text, as well as the videos, what the MOOC actually required to be sustainable was the ongoing contributions of the educator. So I happened to do more work. I happened to find myself more engaged doing work after the book has been completed and students participated on the platform. So what I want to share with you is the following. I have learned that one has to offer a MOOC that will provoke learners, that will stimulate them to come to their own speech. Now, why do I say that? When one stimulates students to come to their own speech, it means that you do not provide them all the answers in the beginning. Neither do you provide them all the available texts that you can find. Because these students who engage with this particular MOOC on Teaching for Change, they want to construct meanings and at the same time also reconstruct the meanings they infer, and as I've come to know them, also deconstruct what they have acquired. So in a way, this form of self-learning that transpired could only have been initiated by the text we initially provided them with. What I found very provocative was when students, in fact, interrogated the text we espoused through the videos. And sometimes when students construct and reconstruct the text, they come up with different meanings that I or the educator has intended for. So for me, that was the most exciting part, because that enabled the educator to learn equally from the students and not just be the provider of text and information. I have encountered with the students the most amazing narratives they have shared with me, which augmented my learning and supplemented my learning and in a way made my own learning and theirs more enriched. So this kind of provocation was aimed to disrupt their thinking. It is not a kind of negative disruption, but a positive disruption where you stimulate them to come up with their own meanings. While the MOOC has been going on for 4 weeks, this is my second point, one had to be cognizant of all the comments students communicated. Now, when you're on the other side of the computer, the student in the MOOC actually demands that you as the educator are responsive to him or her, because they are responsive to one another. And what I've also learned is that often the student who communicates and articulates himself or herself most in the MOOC is actually the proxy of many quiet or silent ones. So it appears as if perhaps there's 100 comments, but then one comment represents about 50 other people. And often one could see on the actual comments that some of these, the participants liked the comments that were articulated and others were complimentary. So in a way, when one imagines that 100 comments you receive per week, it might not be, it might also be tantamount to 150 to 200 comments from the students or the learners. So that implied that once feedback, and this is for me by far the most enriching part, once feedback had to be very articulate, concise, lucid, and it further had to engage the students. I remember one comment I received from a participant, and he said to me, in fact, he came to visit me, that's the irony. He said to me, your comments in the text are far more theoretically enriched than your actual comments you give to students. Now, that is partially true, because one takes for granted when you respond to students that you don't have to be so rigorous, perhaps, or maybe you just offer some kind of cryptic remark or comment. But what the students actually told me is that when one wants to sustain this kind of rigor that we espouse through the MOOC, then you actually have to articulate yourself more decently. In other words, don't take things for granted, and more comprehensively. In other words, respond to students in terms of what they desire and in terms of how serious you take their engagement. So that's for me the second lesson that I've learned, that in as much as you have developed a particular text and your videos have been improved on, and your podcasts have been revised and thrown away and revised again, what I found quite interesting was the comment that your actual communications to the students should be as rigorous theoretically as you have enunciated in the text itself. Then on this particular MOOC, this is actually my third lesson that I've learned. The students were very intent on uncovering what is the actual rationale of the course. What can I learn from this course? What is this course trying to tell me? What is underscoring? What meanings underscore, or what are the reasons for this particular course? Now that's very much in the design process. And therefore when we decided on using case studies, we wanted to articulate through the case studies the rationale for this course, which dealt with the issue of justice, the issue of engagement, and the issue of development. And those three words, justice, engagement, and development, are three important words in teaching and learning. Because what we showed through this course was that there can be a situation where teaching and learning itself through this platform can be just. And how did that happen? The students expressed or articulated their meanings. Their voices were never shut down, but other students also did not hesitate to question or interrogate them if they found that some of the views of others were not really defensible. The same with myself. If students found a particular view of mine questionable, they would proffer their points of view. So in that way, the just humanization unfolded because we listened equally to what one another had to say. Now, this is not a denial that a teacher or an educator has pedagogical knowledge or pedagogical authority of knowledge. Of course, a teacher should have that pedagogical authority of knowledge, but that does not mean that a teacher is necessarily the only voice in the discourse of engagement. So my first lesson was in line, attuned to the rationale, is that students could come to speech. They could articulate their points of view. And in that way, they could rupture the conversations of one and the other. The second aspect was here we had a particular MOOC where democratic action was in perpetual motion. In other words, it wasn't just a conceptual account of what democracy means and how democracy should be about engaging people in a discourse. But what we actually articulated through this particular text is that when students and I and students and other educators engaged, they allowed one another the opportunity to express their point of view without being eliminated from the start. And that to me is the beginning of the democratic process. You cannot begin to silence people in the beginning and make them known as if they are not worthy of having a voice. So what we need to do with this particular course is to say, in as much as we articulate a particular view of education, specifically African education, that African education can be just if it draws upon the life experiences of all the participants. And then the last point is about the notion of development, that development is never conclusive. I mean, that would mark the end of education in any case. The notion of development we espouse is that even though African education is criticized of having been colonized and having suffered severely because of some unjust human action, our notion of development was that is in itself, the wrongs that were perpetrated were in itself a moment of rupturing, and that we should consider that as the initial starting point to improve, to change, to transform, to move towards the better, so that we develop a notion of African education, because that was the MOOC about, that remains in becoming, that there's always more to learn and new ideas that will be espoused and articulated. So, in a way, the MOOC was never really, I had to provide you with all the content. Of course, you had to provide students with some content, but that doesn't mean that the MOOC did not go beyond the content. Because as was mentioned earlier, that these students aged between 26 and 35 on average, I happen to have personal communication from a 70-year-old, or 70-year, let me rather say, rephrase, 70-year young woman from the UK, and how excited she was just to participate to give a voice. The most important aspect of this particular MOOC for me was, although this MOOC was located within an African context, within an African tradition, what participants wanted from the MOOC was, how could I use what is espoused through an Africanist lens in my own context? I give you an example. Take the notion of Ubuntu. And that also provoked many of the participants to, in fact, register for the course. Now, this particular notion of Ubuntu was even applied in Russia, was applied in Glasgow, was applied in Mexico. What am I saying? I'm saying when students through the MOOC encountered a particular concept, they didn't only relate the concept to the context in which it is developed and argued for, but they would want to know of what interest and value is this concept to my pedagogical situation, and how can this concept contribute to changing my life in relation to others in my own context. So in a way, I hate to say this, but MOOCs for me seem to adopt a kind of universalist perspective, that you want to learn from a particular context. So you want to learn from a particular local context, which was the African context. and that local context would then be applied in a global context. And then I gave that some thought, and then I realized, but we keep on arguing that we should become decolonized, de-imperialized. And then I said, but this is an example of how local knowledges or how indigenous understandings of concepts have been used on a universal platform. And instead of always crying, why should we always be influenced through Eurocentric ideas or Anglo-Saxon ideas? Here the MOOC provided an opportunity where indigenized ideas were taken up by an international audience and contextualized within their own context. So for me, knowledge construction and reconstruction is a dialectical process whereby the local influences the global and the global influences the local. And what students also liked was that you cannot just discount any form of knowledge, or you cannot just impose particular understandings of knowledge on people, but that you rather have this kind of intersubjective shared understanding of knowledge, which is more valued rather than a kind of imposition of knowledge as if you cannot learn anything from Africa. So although the MOOC was about teaching and learning, it was more about how you can use particular ideas pertaining to the African continent in a different context. And I found that students actually shared their own stories, and they taught me more than what I could ever have desired. So personally, when I started off working with the team in devising this particular MOOC, and it has gone through this design and production stages, and everyone worked hard, I then realized, but that was only 25% of the MOOC. The MOOC is actually how you sustain your relations with those with whom you engage. And at the moment, I find that aspect the most enriching of my personal journey throughout this particular MOOC. So thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I would just like to say that in as much as this MOOC has been a new experience to me, I never realized that I actually had to take time off from other activities, which I like more than doing the MOOC. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Wahid. That was wonderful. Should actually have the thing that way that you can just see everybody as well. There's a whole room full of people. Okay. All right. So we've got about 10 minutes left for discussion, questions. We had a bit of the broader perspective. Then we had a bit of the nuts and the bolts of the teaching and learning side, the reflection, and then we had the real in-depth reflection from the educator itself on this MOOC. And I'm sure there are many questions waiting to be answered. I just wanted to check quickly something on the stream. Henny, is the sound?
The sound is going out.
The sound is going out. It seems, and the participants, are they still saying they can't hear? Okay, we can just try and do everything we can. We must continue. The show must go on. Okay. What I suggest is that we actually, you can come forward to ask a question if it's, or I can also repeat a question if that is meaningful. Who wants to open the floor? Anyone? Magda?
Thank you, JP. If you could just repeat the question. I'm interested in a student assessment in the MOOC on the one hand, and also the evaluation. For me, that's two different processes, right? So it's how students participated, how they evaluate the MOOC, but also how their learning was assessed.
Okay, so the two questions. I wonder, Professor Wagidu, it's about how the learning was assessed and how it was evaluated, the participation in the MOOC. Maybe you have some thoughts, otherwise Faik could also come in.
The MOOC itself doesn't have a formal procedure of evaluation, but after the completion of the MOOC, students' comment were asked, and students could make suggestions as to what they found, how the MOOC could be improved. But the MOOC itself, this is also one of the shortcomings of MOOCs generally. MOOCs are not, the students are not formally assessed. They should only complete 90% of a MOOC, and then they will be issued with some kind of certificate. But it is not required of them to complete, in fact, a MOOC to 100%. And so in a way, MOOCs are not really assessed formally, summatively at the end of the MOOC, but the only form of assessment would be the comments for engagement students provide you with while you are traversing with them through with the MOOC.
Right. I think that's also... Yeah, sorry.
No formal examination assessment of a MOOC.
The sound is breaking up a bit. Just on that point, that's one of the questions about the future of what we are doing with this, because what Professor Wagidu is describing is maybe this original style of MOOC, where it's about the openness, getting many people participating and actually giving people a experience and a certificate of participation. And I know all the companies are battling with this, and FutureLearn as well, is how do we actually take the next step to maybe even put real modules or even whole programs. Obviously then you need the assessment part. And I think what we've seen so far is that people actually, if there's any summative kind of assessment, they get people to go to exam centers through Pearson or that kind of thing. So similar challenges you would have with a blended or kind of a fully online course that's full credit in a program. That would be the kind of issues. There are quizzes that one could track, I guess, in FutureLearn. So you could set it up a bit more almost robust, almost automatically giving feedback and marking, that kind of thing. Obviously, the other platforms include more of that, with lots of analytics about how much people are writing and how many quizzes are they doing, etc. So the platforms also have that kind of built in. So depending on the kind of MOOC that you are building, but that is the question. Moving forward, can we actually provide full programs or short courses or modules in this specific format? And then there are obviously other concepts like SPOCs and MOOCs, no, not MOOCs, only SPOCs, where you, for example, use a course as almost the input to initiation. It's called wrap MOOCs and stuff like that as well, but your students are still with you in class. So you've got students in class that have the more formal education or more formal program, but it's enriched by the global also coming into the classroom. And that people have found to be hugely beneficial. The kind of things that Professor Wagidu has been describing could also be not just the educators, to the educators enrichment and the people online, but possibly also the people in your physical class as well.
In fact, your examiners are your peers on the MOOC with you.
Right.
Your examiners would test you. If you talk about evaluation, your accountability is to your peers, your participants on the MOOC itself.
Great. Right, thanks. Another comment or question? Who wants to go and do a MOOC just as we finish here? Anybody at the back?
Yes, my question, I was very interested in what Yusuf was saying around the democratic process
I'll repeat, Yusuf.
that the MOOC lends itself to, and he spoke a lot about the interaction with the participants enrolled in this MOOC. But what I wanted to know was, because I don't know anything about this process, is the dialectic that develops in this kind of process? Is it only textual, or are there other forms of communication as well?
Okay, so it's about the democratic process and how one creates this in the platform, and is it basically mostly textual, or are there other ways and means of also developing this? You mentioned the podcast, so that might be a way, but what's your perspective?
Yeah, look, the podcast, you don't have to comment on every comment. I mean, if you're going to read 80 comments of students, and then you will have to read, and if you want to respond to every comment, that's too time consuming. It will take you 2 or 3 days. But what one does is to read those comments, read it, and then give a collective response. And then what I found with students, they in fact enjoy the podcast. That the podcast is really a summary of your responses to the overall comments of all the students. And some students can also do podcasts themselves, and they can upload it, and then they would expect others to listen to their audio recordings. But I found that the podcast would work oppositely for a kind of collective summary of the argument or a section of the work or the overall module of it.
Thanks. Are there any online questions maybe?
I've just asked, so it seems
Okay.
as if
Somebody's typing. Okay.
So we'll see.
We have about 3 minutes left, so is there one? Sorry, we can give the online colleagues also preference for the moment. Thanks, Antoinette.
Question coming in from Tygerberg. How did Professor Wagriet adapt to the students' understanding?
How did you adapt to the students' understanding? It's from Tygerberg.
Say again? Is there a question?
The question was, how did you adapt to the students' understanding? Is that correct? Antoinette?
Okay. The word perhaps I wouldn't use is, the word is not adapt. How did I respond to students' comments?
Yes.
I think what one has to be very cautious of is that this is an open platform, and these students join the platform on a voluntary basis. So they can easily be discouraged from not participating. So part of the role of the educators is to keep them involved. And I found that when there are particular individuals who incessantly speak throughout the MOOC, for example, there's perhaps 2 or 3 individuals who take over the conversation, they actually demand that you communicate with them, that to them, in other words, that you offer a response to them in person. So what you have to look at your comments and then ask yourself, but Richard or JP, you are communicating the most. And because your communication is so high and intense that I will have to make time to give a personal message or a personal comment. And that way, the participant acts on your teachers, because you have to show them that you learn more from them than what you have to offer.
Excellent. It was at the back, Jean.
I see an advantage of the MOOCs for students who are perhaps considering going into a master's or a PhD, and they use this as preparation for some. But what about copyright and plagiarism? So if you're part of a MOOC like this and you do your further degree afterwards, and you use content from such a MOOC.
Okay, Professor Wagriet, the question was, many people want to articulate from the MOOC as part of postgrad studies like a master's, etc. In your experience, what you deal with the question about now the people go for formal studies and they may plagiarize, or how does one deal with the idea of students, using the content or the experience of the MOOC going forward? Is that more or less right? Yeah.
Look, MOOCs, specific MOOCs have specific aims and approaches. And if I can just imagine that a student would cut and paste a conversation and just adapt it, how would that contravene the plagiarism policy? I suppose that will be picked up if we send it through some system that can detect plagiarism. But I don't think, if I listen to the comments of students, that the potential is actually there to violate copyright, because those are comments made by students. And often the comments that they offer are substantiated comments, but they are not comments which they have taken from somewhere or copied it, and then you want to recopy it and offer it in a thesis. I don't see the potential in MOOCs in enhancing copyright violations. What I do see in the MOOCs is that the content of the MOOC, which the authors, which the educators provide, or the institutions, that content has the possibility of being referenced, and there's no harm to
Oops.
And you can refer to this as
Professor Magriet, it's hy hak 'n bietjie vas.
in the book which is established, and you can do that. But I don't think copyright violation is an issue with book. Those are that.
Okay. That's maybe a sign that we need to get back to the office.
Yeah, I think I lost. I think
Professor, yeah, it really went down. So I think we're going to close here. We got the gist of it. Thank you so much. There was a final question at the back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Policies, open content risk. I mean, that's the hype at the moment as well. Maybe you can share one or two ideas, and then we'll close for the session.
Yeah, the idea for Teaching for Change was that it was actually a new course. It wasn't any, the content wasn't taken from an existing course. So that would also ensure that we adhere to the university's copyright policy. With regard to, I think it was Jean's question about copyright and potential copyright infringement. When you sign up for Future Learn, you acknowledge that, or they make use of a Creative Commons license. So you are allowed to use potentially, say, the comments that somebody else made for research purposes, as long as you acknowledge that it was from Future Learn and potentially the person's name. But you don't actually have to contact them and ask them for permission to do that. So that is just a disclaimer that you click on when you sign up onto Future Learn.
All right, I think there are probably many more burning questions, and as I've said, you know, it's quite a it's quite a hard process. It's not easy, but I think it was so worthwhile for us, and I think for what you've heard from Professor Magriet as well. So let it bubble inside of you, and if there are any great ideas, you know, come forward, and we can see where the road forward leads us. By that, I want to close the session. I want to really thank Faik and Professor Magriet. Really want to thank you as well for taking this trouble. It actually worked quite well. I want to thank all the online participants for their question, and also being there and coming being with us this afternoon. And to each and every one of you, thank you for taking time to come and sit here, to be present and to talk and to listen about this very interesting and I think emerging kind of mode that's in one way or another, probably part of our future. Thank you so much.
Thank you.